Hello, and welcome to Book of the Mouse Club, episode 92, Wednesday, July 19th, 2023.
Morning, monsieur.
Where are you off to?
The bookshop. I just finished the most wonderful story about a beanstalk and an ogre and...
That's nice. Marie! The baguettes! Hurry up!
I'm sorry, but how can one possibly pay attention to a book with no pictures in it?
My dear child, there are a great many good books in this world without pictures.
I almost bounced clear out of the book. Some bouncing, huh?
Come home or make myself known.
J. Thaddeus Turtle, Esquire. Have you never met him? You will find his story in this delightful little book, The Wind and the Willows.
I've come to return the book I borrowed.
Finished already?
Oh, I couldn't put it down. Have you got anything new?
Welcome back. I'm your host, Courtney, and I'm joined as always by the White Rabbit to my Mad Hatter, my lovely co-host, Emily.
Thanks, Courtney. We are venturing down that rabbit hole today and hosting an unbirthday party of our own. And what good is a party without a special guest?
But of course, last month we were in part 2 of our British Invasion summer series and discussed The Wind in the Willows with Connor Perkins, co-host of Poor Unfortunate Podcast. We wanted to make sure that his other half had a chance to discuss with us again as well, so we are pleased to have Caroline Aimetti join us once again. Both Connor and Caroline joined us on episode 58 to discuss The Great Mouse Detective Basil of Baker Street by Eve Titus. On our last episode, I went down the rabbit hole of Connor's professional bio, so I have extended the same courtesy here for you, Caroline. Caroline was born a theater kid on Long Island and told her parents she was going to NYU when she was in 5th grade because that's where Idina Menzel went. She did it, graduating with a BFA in honors in drama from NYU Tisch 11 years later. Caroline also trained in Shakespeare at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art in London. She recently celebrated the 3rd birthday of Poor Unfortunate Podcast, a comedic millennial take on all things Disney, co-hosted with longtime friend and fellow actor Connor Perkins. She can be seen in spots for brands like Lysol and Coca-Cola, and her recent New York City stage appearances include Look Back in Anger, Studio 54 celebrates Mel Brooks at 54 Below, and Broadway's Future Songbook at Lincoln Center. Welcome back, Caroline.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me back. I'm so excited.
We made sure to include you for today's Alice in Wonderland selection because you offered quite the hot take on this iconic character during a Poor Unfortunate Podcast rant and rave episode earlier this year, and we cannot wait to dive deeper into that today with you.
Well, thank you for having me on, knowing what you know already about my relationship with Alice. I'm excited to hear what the two of you think, too. It's going to be great.
So before we get into our discussion, as always, we like to do some background like you and Connor do as well. And we have background right now for both the books and then the animated film that they inspired. So stick with us. I promise all this background is relevant to today's discussion. So before beginning, as always, crediting my sources, the introduction and notes by Tan Lin from the Barnes & Noble Classics edition of Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass, which is the version I read. Britannica.com, the Lewis Carrol Society.org, PBS, writersdisease.net, and yes, of course, Wikipedia. Thank you for leading me down the rabbit hole to all these other resources. So, our author, Charles Ludwig Dodgson, bet you didn't know his legal name, but I am going to refer to him as through his literary pseudonym, Lewis Carrol, throughout the rest of this little bio. He was born in 1832 at the old parsonage in Daresbury in Cheshire, England, where his father served as a reverend. As the 3rd of 11 children, Carrol often made up games and riddles for his younger siblings and showed an aptitude for writing when he started a rectory magazine for his family and parish, where he maintained that for nearly 20 years. So he has quite a writing background. While socially isolated at school, some attribute this to some of his health concerns as a kid, his stutter. He was always academically gifted, reading university-level texts by 7 years old. So by the time he entered Christ Church College in Oxford in the 1850s, his stellar examination scores in mathematics and classic studies earned him a studentship. Now, this is like a scholarship, but it's like postdoc kind of scholarship where he got to stay there pretty much throughout his life, and they paid for all of his research and teachings and whatnot. So he remains there for most of his life as a student, a tutor, a lecturer in mathematics. up until the 1880s. Maintenance of his studentship was contingent on remaining unmarried and proceeding to holy orders. So he was ordained as a deacon in the Church of England in 1861. If he became a priest, he could have gone on to marry, but he was pretty content remaining a bachelor. Between 1854 and 56, he started publishing poems and literary works in British national magazines like The Comic and The Train. His poem Solitude, published in The Train in 1856, is the first time we see him use his pseudonym Lewis Carroll. It was around this time that The Adventures of Alice come into being. Having no family of his own, he spent a lot of time socially with the families of his colleagues at the university and always seemed to gravitate towards the kids. On July 4th of 1862, no, not the 4th of July in the United States, he was with the Liddell family in a picnic and rowing on the river. The main character was named for one of the children, Alice Liddell. That day was dubbed the Golden Afternoon and is actually commemorated in a poem written by Carroll at the preface of what would become Alice in Wonderland. That day, Alice begged Carroll to write down the stories for her, and later a family friend of the Liddell family who saw the manuscript persuaded Carroll and the Liddells that this should be published. Carroll wanted a professional to illustrate the novel. He did his own illustrations for this manuscript for the kids, but he said, if this is going to become bigger, I want more professional illustrations. And he found Punch Magazine's cartoonist Sir John Tenniel, who would provide the 42 iconic wood engraved illustrations for the novel. Alice in Wonderland was published by Macmillan and Company in 1865, and its first edition sold out immediately, with a second reprint in the same year in time for Christmas. By 1866, the American publisher D. Appleton and Company took it over for the United States. The book has never been out of print and has been translated to over 170 languages. Celebrity fans of the book on its first release included Oscar Wilde and even Queen Victoria herself. The success of Wonderland led to its sequel, Through the Looking Glass and What Alice Found There, also simply called Through the Looking Glass, in 1871, again with illustrations by Sir John Tenniel. Like Wonderland, Through the Looking Glass has always been in publication since its release. The copyright for Alice in Wonderland expired in 1907, and by Christmas of the same year, 7 new illustrated editions have been published. So this is why you can find so many different copies, or like I have Barnes & Noble. We all read, I believe, a different edition. That's because it's open to the public and public domain to publish. It is estimated that over 100 million copies of Alice in Wonderland have been sold since its original publication. There have been several adaptations of this book since its publication on stage, screen, other novels, manga, fashion. Little did Carroll know he spurred an entire entertainment industry just with this story. One of the earliest adaptations of Alice was a musical production of the story in London's West End in 1886, and that's only 10 years, not very long after it was first published, 20 years after. So pretty close, and he even got to see those performances. Alice celebrated her 150th birthday in 2015 and is still popular as a popular children's literary figure to this day. To conclude, Charles Dodson, or Lewis Carroll, is a Renaissance man who even call a genius. He is credited as a logician, mathematician, photographer, and novelist. He authored at least 15 mathematical and other academic works under his legal name and just as many literary works of poems and fiction under his pseudonym, but is still best known for Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. While aspects of his life are criticized and controversial, we're not going to talk a lot about that. We're staying focused on Alice in Wonderland, but there's quite a background to this man. He is agreed by scholars regardless to be a master of the nonsense fiction genre and a hallmark writer of Victorian era and children's literature. He died in 1888 of pneumonia at age 66. He is commemorated with stained glass windows of Wonderland characters in Carroll's hometown church, All Saints in Daresbury, Cheshire. There's also a granite sculpture by Edwin Russell, the Mad Hatter's Tea Party, located in Warrington, which is also in Cheshire, England. He has a plaque in the Poets' Corner in Westminster Abbey, and there are plenty of other commemorations around the world, including the statue in Central Park in New York City, which we featured on our Instagram page.
Thank you so much for that always well-researched and thorough overview. Much appreciated. We will be moving right now into the background of Disney's Alice in Wonderland, and I am, of course, pulling from our favorite resource, Disney A to Z. So here's the entry for that animated film. quote, animated version of Lewis Carroll's famous story of Alice and her adventures after falling down a rabbit hole. Following a white rabbit, she meets such strange characters as a talking doorknob who help her through the keyhole to Wonderland, Tweedledum and Tweedledee, who tell the story of the walrus and the carpenter, the caterpillar, and the Mad Hatter and March Hare celebrating an unbirthday at their tea party. Finally, Alice has a showdown with the Queen of Hearts and her army of playing cards. The whole thing becomes such a nightmare that Alice awakens from her dream to the recitations of her sister and purring of her cat Dinah. Alice is voiced by Catherine Beaumont. Other voices include Verna Felton, Queen of Hearts, Bill Thompson, White Rabbit, Ed Wynn, Mad Hatter, Jerry Colonna, March Hare, and Sterling Holloway, Cheshire Cat. Premiered in England on July 26, 1951, and released in the US 2 days later. Directed by Clyde Geronimi, Hamilton Lusk, and Wilfred Jackson. Songs include All in the Golden Afternoon and I'm Late by Bob Hilliard and Sammy Fain, and the Unbirthday Song by Mac David, Al Hoffman, and Jerry Livingston, 75 Minutes. Nominated for an Academy Award for Best Scoring of a Musical Picture, this animated feature had been on Walt Disney's mind since 1933, when he considered a live-action version starring Mary Pickford. He shelved the project after Paramount made a version, but later had artist David Hall, a Hollywood artist and designer, create some concepts for an all-animated film. World War II intervened, and it was not until the late 1940s that the work began again in earnest. One of Walt's big problems with this film was that he was dealing with a highly regarded classic, and what was charming and appropriately bizarre in the book seemed oddly out of place on the motion picture screen. Walt's feeling, expressed years later, was that Alice had no heart. An edited version aired on television on November 3rd, 1954. The film was rediscovered by the psychedelic generation when it was made available on 16 millimeters for schools and was re-released in theaters in 1974 and 1981. Re-released on video in 1981 and 1986 and kept in re-release since, end quote. Disney fans will also likely know that Tim Burton directed Alice in Wonderland in 2010 and Alice Through the Looking Glass in 2016. Our focus in this summer series is on classic British literature and the resulting Disney animated features, but I am sure we will touch on both of those films at some point during our discussion. So let us jump right into it. Emily, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Thanks for sticking with us, everyone, through our background there. But all of this is really interesting. And prior to today, what is everyone's relationship with Alice? Courtney, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. This is one that I enjoyed as a kid and had an Alice phase as far as the film goes. I think that was sparked by having to read it in middle school. We were at both Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass, so I was revisiting the text now about 20 or so years later. Been a while. In revisiting it, we'll get to it, and I'm not quite sure why I had an Alice face. Maybe we can unpack that, but for sure, I would tell people it was my second favorite Disney film after Beauty and the Beast, but I would not maintain that currently. So we will get through that all together. How about you, Caroline?
Ooh, I'm intrigued, Courtney, because for when you said that for a minute, I was like, oh, I'm in trouble. But okay, I think we're together on this. So I definitely, when I was younger, had a picture book version of the novel. But for me, it didn't compare to other ones that I had at the time. Like I had this beautifully illustrated, like Little Mermaid and Rapunzel, and this didn't feel like it was up there with those for me. And so, as you two know, as we'll get to in a little while, the movie is not my cup of tea. Like no pun actually intended. I don't have too many memories of sitting all the way through it as a kid. My main memory is honestly watching the Unbirthday song and one of the sing-along songs VHSs and feeling like, yep, like that's plenty for me. Like I don't need any more from that movie. But I was a huge fan of Adventures in Wonderland, which was that 90s live action TV show. Did either of you watch that?
I did, yeah. I thought it was a fever dream that I had as a kid because I was so young when it was on.
Yes.
And then they're like, oh, this is coming to Disney Plus a few years ago. I was like, okay, I did not make that up.
I fully did as well. And I this is the part that I actually still think is a fever dream. I remember like I was very obsessed with watching it on TV, but I remember there was also some sort of interactive feature in Epcot.
At Spaceship Earth?
Yes.
Okay, I can confirm.
Oh my God.
Because that was the fever dream part. I was like, I remember sitting at the end of Spaceship Earth watching clips of this, and I have no idea why. So we are not crazy, or we both were in the same weird multiverse dimension.
Or we're all mad here. I don't know. Okay, that makes me feel a lot better because I was sure the show existed, but I wasn't so sure about that Parks edition. So amazing, amazing. So it's interesting for me. Like I think it's very telling that was kind of my favorite Alice thing because a lot of, even though it was still fantastical and silly, the nonsense factor was kind of taken out. And so it was more palatable for me at the time. And so not that they're exactly the same in style or tone, but I was a full out Wizard of Oz girly. Like I went through my phase of that. So there just wasn't, I don't think there was a particular space in my reading life that I needed Alice to fill for me. So when we were reading this, like parts of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland felt familiar as if I had read them before. I wonder if that's because parts of the Disney film are so faithful to the book, but this was definitely my first time reading through the Looking Glass. So I'm excited to talk about that with you too also.
The first time I read Alice, I've talked about this before on the show, my classics phase in college where I somehow, for some reason, like for 6 months, only exclusively read classics.
And you weren't even an English major.
No, I wasn't.
What are you doing?
I wanted to be an English minor, but UMD told me no.
Sorry.
Yeah, struggles. So I have read this before, but now I'm revisiting now 12-ish years later, I think. Similar to both of you, sing-along songs is really where I got my Alice pick, particularly for Mad Tea Party, which I'm going to tip my hand. That's my favorite scene in the movie, probably because I've watched that scene so many times and it has a song to it. But yeah, this is one that I love it visually. It's a beautiful movie to watch. Now and then I'm like, oh, I should revisit this one. So I maybe watch it once a year, but it's not one I regularly reach for. I do think sing-along songs is predominantly where I got my Alice kick. We'll talk more about my Alice journey with theme parks later. But yeah, and I did remember Adventures in Wonderland. My fever dreams are not quite as vivid as yours.
But we've confirmed it was real. I'm so happy.
But when I think when it released on Disney Plus, like someone reposted like the theme song, like the opening montage, and that I was able to sing along with it, and I was like, whoa.
Wow.
I was like, I don't remember any specific episode or scenes or interactions with it in a theme park, but like I knew the theme song, so that
incredible
came out of nowhere.
You can stay then.
Yes,
it is one I will have to revisit on Disney Plus.
Perfect. Well, let's talk about both books together. I mean, they're kind of novellas, so they are often packaged as one, and we felt given the amount of material taken for both, we would talk about them together. So thoughts overall on these two books?
So reading Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, it did remind me of why Alice and Wonderland in general have never just really been my thing. Again, we'll talk more about what I've discussed on Poor Unfortunate podcast in a bit, but everybody kind of knows that already. So the adventures that Alice goes on are quite nonsensical, obviously. I think there are also aspects of parody and satire, especially of very British culture and society, that I fully admit probably just go right over my head, so I don't glean as much enjoyment out of them. And many of the characters and adventures were familiar to me because of the Disney movie, of course. And I think with the Disney film visuals in my head, some portions of this book were easy for me to follow and place. I think if I hadn't seen the film, I would have tuned out a bit because I just don't, and this is just a personal thing, I don't get enough enjoyment out of trying to follow the very thin string of plot and some of the extremely nonsensical conversations that Alice has with these characters. I think I take this for granted because I know the story so well, but it's just really interesting to me that a book considered a classic like this one has so little variation in the way the inhabitants of Wonderland interact with Alice. Like nearly all of them express some kind of contempt towards her, picking apart her logic despite their own nonsense, and they further confuse her. They make her feel alone, with the exception maybe of the Cheshire Cat. So I don't know, for me, I've always thought, like, wouldn't a more interesting story involve a wider range of characters, from like the benign to the mischievous, silly to at least, a little bit easier to relate to. So that was Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. But I have to say, I was surprised by how much I actually enjoyed Through the Looking Glass. It reminded me so much more of the books like Wizard of Oz, Coraline, that I was a big fan of as a kid. And I think that's a lot because of the alternate version of Alice's world existing through a mirror felt so much more exciting to me. And I found the characters in Through the Looking Glass so much more enjoyable and intriguing and honestly just less irritating. And we'll get to that too. And I know we will discuss this in a little bit, but I am just really confused about the characters that Disney chose for the film. I think we miss out on some really wonderful ones that are part of Through the Looking Glass. So, like I said, we'll talk about that. But Looking Glass just feels much more like what I wish Alice's Adventures in Wonderland was, which is Alice, translates things going on in her life into, things that are larger than life and fantastical and finds her way through them, ending with her reaching some sort of dream of hers. So in this case, being a queen that ends up not being as grand as she wished it was. So it still gets like nonsensical for sure, but not nearly as much as Wonderland does. I don't remember, I was reading this and I forget who asked me, what I was reading and why. And I think at that point, I was midway through Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. And I think I described it as a pile of poo. And I think that's a little strong, but I was very frustrated in that moment. And I know people might come for me for that, but I guess my take on that is why I'm here. So we'll talk about it. But I really just ultimately wish I could just wipe the film from my head and have come at this with fresh eyes, because the part that I did come at that way was so enjoyable to me. So yeah, that's my way of distilling it. So much I want to discuss with you all, but that's like initial thoughts on those two books.
I had some similar thoughts that you did. Like I would agree that the parts that because of the film, like reading scenes that I know Disney picked for their film, they were easier to follow. I had a much clearer idea of what this looked like, and it didn't, even though it's still nonsensical because I've watched it so many times over the last 30 years of my life, that like I was able to follow like the conversation between the March Hare and the Mad Hatter just because I had that visual. And there were parts that I did tune out. Was it the woman with the pig?
Oh God.
I was like, what's happening right now? I definitely zoned out. And had to reread a little bit. And this was one that I think overall, like I would give this a 3. Like my Goodreads review, I'm going to give it a 3. I really enjoy the wordplay. I did listen to a good portion of the book with audio while I was reading it. I really enjoyed taking this approach. Courtney, you introduced me to this approach, especially with classics, particularly British literature, really helped me. And I really like the cadence, and maybe it's just the narrator I had, but it sounded whimsical while being nonsensical and tongue twisty. So the cadence of the reading, especially when it got to the poems, having that read aloud to me was really nice. So those parts I liked better doing both. I still recommend, even to my students, classics if they're tough to get into. Listen to the audio; it does help a little bit. But yeah, there were still parts of it that I zoned out because there are so many characters, and frankly, they don't go into the next chapter. So it's okay if you forget them. So like a lot of British literature, and particularly, this is not our first time, Courtney and I reading books from the 19th century. It wasn't ever serialized. They are 2 separate, fully published books. But I think you can read it like a serial. So like you can read a chapter at a time and very nicely put it down and then pick up in the next adventure, just knowing that the dream ends at the end. So it is easy to pick up and put down. I did zone out. But overall, I love the wordplay. There are some very iconic lines, and I don't think it can be ignored that we still say things like off with their head, or how many times have we said, let's go down the rabbit hole. Like you just know that that's an Alice in Wonderland reference, even though you've never read the book. So I still think it holds a place as a classic because of its cultural impact. I was very happy to read it. It might be another 10 years before I pick it up.
You two have empowered me to speak my truth. So thank you.
Let's go.
Y'all, I picked this British Invasion summer series. This was my idea. And I've decided I don't think I'm a fan of 19th century British literature. This is we got one more episode to go, but we will have a Victorian expert to pick us up. Yeah. it was my idea, and I was like, oh, this will be fun. But Emily, to your point, I was not able to get an audiobook of this one, and I do think your advice, though I very seldom follow it, would have really enhanced this for me, because the poems, all of that, I struggled just reading. I was also reading, this is just me personally, it was only available through Libby and not through Kindle, so I had to read it on my iPad, so I was already like grumpy about that. And my library didn't have an audiobook of both of them, so I didn't want to have like two separate files. It was a whole thing. And when you said zoning out, I literally fell asleep twice reading this. This is so sad. My husband had friends in town, and so they were staying at a Disney resort, and I'm like, okay, like, woo, me party, introvert time. I miss him, but I'm gonna have time to sit down and read my book. Both nights I fell asleep before 9:30, and I'm like an 11:30 bedtime girl with the iPad in my hand. So I feel so bad. I hope that someone's not coming to the show like, this is my favorite book. I'm sorry. This is the fun thing about book club. We get to bring different perspectives to the table. But that is my truth. I think this summer series that allowed me to really examine what my tastes are. It was inevitable. I feel like we had to do some of these classics like Peter Pan, Wind in the Willows. How could we not? Alice was definitely one of the early ones that we listed when we started this podcast now 5 years ago. So here we are. We're doing it. We're bringing hot takes. I'm ready.
Wow. I wasn't really sure what to expect. So this is very exciting to me. So, okay. So let's let it rip then in that case. So the question, I've talked about it a little bit as well. This question is probably the most debated about Alice in Wonderland and the Disney film too, really. What do we think this story is about? What is it getting at? Emily, what do you think?
So I think if someone asked me like, oh, tell me what Alice in Wonderland is about, the synopsis I would give is that this is a little girl who falls asleep and she's bored with her everyday life. And so she has dreams of adventures of being not in a normal place. And you just follow her on these fun, crazy adventures until she wakes up and realizes maybe reality isn't so terrible. That's kind of all it is that you're following Alice through this make-believe world, and you can enjoy individual adventures or get frustrated with other ones. But I'm going to ask you all to come back to me at the end. So with the version that I read, I have this pretty much 22-page academic paper by Tan Lin, who wrote an introduction to this. And there's a lot of scholarly work out there on this book, which is intriguing, and he brought up some points of some themes of Alice. I'm not going to go through every theme he talked about, but there's one that I want to come back to, and maybe this will give us a fresh perspective. But what would be all of your
I think I could use that fresh perspective. I don't even know. I have a degree.
Actually dying. Oh, Courtney.
I have a degree in English literature, and I'm like, did I earn that?
Oh my God.
I guess, like, there's often like a childhood innocence and the loss of that as she's encountering these different characters, and they're having her question her own reality and sanity, but there's just not really a through line to me. It feels so episodic, as does the film, which we'll get to. That's actually my husband's complaint about the movie. He's like, I can't get through this one. I was like, oh, I'm sorry. Well, we're watching on the 75-inch TV tonight, so pop some popcorn. And he agreed that it jumps around a bit, and I think that was true of both of these books, making it a bit difficult to make those connections.
It's because I didn't know what to expect, and because I do feel like I've gone off about Alice before, I really tried to look at this in a new way. And I will admit, there was a part of this that there are a couple of parts of this that really did affect me. I think I was trying really hard, but I think this is for real. So for me, the most poignant parts of the book are the reflections by Alice and others on, lightly touching on growing up and the passage of time. So the way that Alice's adventures in Wonderland ends with Alice's sister dreaming herself, I enjoyed that. So unlike Alice, her sister's able to recognize that as she half dreams about Wonderland, everything she sees or hears is influenced by what's happening in the real world, and she just has to open her eyes and everything from Wonderland is just going to vanish. Like, she isn't immersed in the reality of the world the way that Alice is. And she thinks about the way that Alice will be a grown woman and that maybe she'll tell this story to children one day. Wonderland is so often irritating and confusing to Alice, and I wonder if this book is less about wistfulness over the dreamy adventures of childhood, but maybe in a way like some sort of relief that although growing up, like, you know, as it pertains to, like, we symbolize that with Alice's changing in size all the time, it can be bittersweet. But maybe what he's getting at is the world starts to make a bit more sense when you grow, because Alice exhibits so much more empathy and patience in Through the Looking Glass. And although I know it only takes place about, I think it's like 6 months after Wonderland, I wonder if this is partially just due to Alice getting older. Like, a lot of development happens between, 7 and 8. It's a big jump. And in Alice, it's for the better. But the thing that stuck with me, I wrote down a passage that I just like need to repeat out loud because I was surprised that I pulled anything from this that was like, wow, I've been moved by this. But this part really did. So this is from Through the Looking Glass, the part that says, of all the strange things that Alice saw in her journey through the looking glass, this was the one that she always remembered most clearly. Years afterwards, she could bring the whole scene back again as if it had been only yesterday. The mild blue eyes and kindly smile of the night, the setting sun gleaming through his hair and shining on his armor in a blaze of light that quite dazzled her. The horse quietly moving about. All this she took in like a picture, as with one hand shading her eyes, she leaned against a tree, watching the strange pair and listening in a half dream to the melancholy music of the song. To me, this passage actually felt very magical and it's very bittersweet. Yet at the same time, if I went to Wonderland or the Looking Glass world, I wouldn't want to go back there. So my personal read on this is that this is just, I guess, a more nuanced exploration of growing up and it not always being a bad thing not to be able to return to childhood, because some parts of it are really difficult. And I don't know, I just thought it was interesting that the books also play about the idea of, who's dreaming about who? Like, where do dreams come from? And then as I started thinking about all of that, and like you both said, there's been so much scholarly study on this book. I'm just like, I wonder if like Lewis Carroll would be like, talking about this is pointless. Like, I started telling the story to bring joy to children and to entertain them. And like, I've worked as a nanny for a really long time. And the more outlandish you get with kids, like the bigger belly laughs that you get from them. And I feel like these books could just be one long exercise in him trying to get those kids that he's telling the story to just laugh out loud. And maybe like that's all that it really is. I won't even, we'll talk a bit more about the film. To me, the film is just like, it feels like there's even less of a point than there is in the book. I feel like the book is getting at some bigger things. And to me, as you've heard me say, I don't think there's a point to this film. I think it was more for aesthetic purposes. But yeah, I did enjoy, again, I was going to this trying to be more positive. So the little like poignant and very beautiful moments like that one with the night, I think I really latched onto them and was like, some sort of meaning or takeaway, like, thank God. So yeah, I'm glad that I can really say how I feel. That's a relief.
So I agree with you. I'm going to preface, even though I'm going to be referencing a scholarly work here, I am by no means an expert in this. I have only read a few things from different people on the internet and summarized in other blogs. I read Tanlin's introduction, but these were some takeaways that I personally took from some things that I read about the analysis and the themes of Alice in Wonderland. I'm going to agree with you, Caroline, that I really think in the creation of Alice in Wonderland, this is Lewis Carroll using his imagination. He has always been known for his mathematical mind. He loves playing around with logic and word puzzles. He created word puzzles that we still play today. So I think for him, this was just a fun exercise for him to use his creativity and then also connect with the kids in the families that he hung out with, because he didn't have a family of his own. So I agree with you that this probably is just like, I was having fun. They had fun. We published a book. But something that was interesting that was noted as once Freud publishes his work in the 1910s, 1913, 1917, somewhere in that range, this is when people start thinking about, this is where he publishes that idea of what the subconscious is in psychoanalysis. And we start to see people revisiting and starting to analyze literature, analyzing dreams, and specifically dreams. And this whole book is about a dream. So a lot of Freudian things get thrown into this and its analysis moving forward past once it is now in the public domain. So I think a lot of the things that I have read post that have a little bit of a psychology lens through it. So a couple things from Tanlin that stood out to me. He does credit that he characterizes this as an anti-narrative and an inverted quest romance. So anti-hero, it's a backwards quest. He also says that Carol's Alice books have a moral nothingness. Like childhood, they end. And yet both books, which end with measured recollection and memory, seem to continue into the future. So there's not supposed to be this big character arc. He said that's not the point, is not to go through this journey where Alice comes out different in the end. It's okay that it just ends. Sometimes we emerge out of life stages without having this big pinnacle something. Or not even life stage. This is an afternoon dream. One singular event does not have to be your life-changing event. And then he goes on to talk about this. In summary, what I took away is that the entire book from his analysis is supposed to be a mirror of childhood and adulthood. He says, quote, "The principal dream of most children, the dream within the dream, as it were, is the dream of not dreaming any longer, the dream of growing up. For the adult, the outlook is reversed. The adult's quest is an inverted one, to find those desires again in more reasonable forms. And this involves forgetting the original childhood desires to become an adult in order to remember them as an adult." So the Alice books continued, quote, "managed to show both these quests, that of the child to look forward and of the adult to look back, simultaneously as mirror logics of each other." So what I took from this is that if you're reading this as a kid, you identify with Alice, who wants to grow up, and so she is the grown-up in each of these scenes. She brings the reason and the logic to the craziness of Wonderland. She is the grown-up. And she's getting frustrated trying to interact with grown-ups. And as an adult reading this book, you could read this as how we are often as adults now annoyed with children. Like, when like my students now, they're like, "I'm never going to hate the younger generation." I'm like, wait 20 years.
Wait 10.
Wait 10. I start teaching Gen Alpha next year. We're switching out of Gen Z.
Oh, wow.
But the reverse of this is like Alice is frustrated trying to navigate this adult world. As we often see that kids can't navigate our world and we get frustrated with them, think about how frustrated they must feel trying to make sense of the world you're trying to get them to grow up into. So depending on how you're reading this and what perspective you're coming from, you either feel frustrated with Alice because you're trying to grow up and adults aren't making sense to you, or you're the adult who has to remember, oh yeah, they still need to grow up and it's okay and they can have this whimsical outlook on life. So that was something I took from this, which I thought was interesting. They go on to talk more about like how mathematics plays into this, wordplay. Like often we see Alice get frustrated because word acquisition, particularly as a kid, it takes time to be able to articulate accurately your thoughts, feelings, your emotions. And we see often how the characters go back and forth, like, say exactly what you mean. Well, that is what I meant. Well, that means literally, blah, blah, blah. And they're fighting over what words mean. We often see that between children and adults. They're trying to grasp to a word to describe how they're feeling, or they can't. So Alice cries a lot when she can't explain what she's thinking. We see that with kids. And the adults of Wonderland get frustrated with her. Well, that's kind of real life. So it's kind of a reminder of like, she's really trying. So it's an interesting perspective. So the looking glass is used an adult looking at kids and kids looking at adults.
I like that. Very introspective. I see you all have elevated this and informed me with new knowledge. Thank you.
So again, there's so much literary work out there. If you are an Alice fan, I do encourage you maybe having that lens going into reading this book. If you find someone, read some maybe literary analysis first, and then maybe those themes might pop out more to you. So I actually read that paper in between Wonderland and Looking Glass. That did inform my reading a little bit.
I wish I had. I think it would have helped me. I wish I had read it before I read Adventures in Wonderland, but now I know.
Now we're preparing future readers.
Yes,
hopefully.
exactly.
And hopefully they have not already turned it off. They're like, what is this? They hate it. But I think that's the fun perspective of podcasts. Speaking of which, we will get to your hot take.
Oh yeah. So let's get to those hot takes. So let's talk about characters. And we want to turn to Caroline because of Poor Unfortunate Podcast Down the Rabbit Hole episode. So what do you think of Alice? And then I kind of want to twist this now that we've seen the film and read the book. Do you have an Alice you like better, or are they just both abhorrent?
So I'm going to try to control myself because I failed to do that in the episode of Poor Unfortunate Podcast. But as a Cliff's Notes version of my rant about Alice from that episode, that discussion was a little bit more about, it was about Alice in general, but a lot of it was focused on her as like a Disney heroine, Disney icon specifically. And my argument was that she doesn't deserve a spot amongst other Disney icons because in the film, she lacks kindness and bravery and intelligence, of which Disney icons and heroines have at least one or two of those characteristics. So in the film, it's established much more so than in the book that Alice desires a place like Wonderland, a world of my own, as she sings. So it's so frustrating. This is really what set me off. In the first place about her is when she reacts to nearly everything in the place that she dreamed up with anger and disgust. And this young girl pretty regularly threatens the inhabitants of Wonderland with violence. Like, she tells the flowers that she's going to pick them, just like bullying behavior. So I can acknowledge, and I think what you just read, Emily, is super helpful in informing this as well, like in terms of we pass through some stages in life and there isn't a big lesson. That was kind of my complaint about the movie, but that's because there's a bit more pressure on the film version of Alice. As the title character of a Disney film, we expect her to behave more like a heroine, learning maybe a little something about herself along the way and having at least a relatively well-defined personality. Alice from the book emerges back into the real world from Wonderland in very much the same way as Alice from the film, just like suddenly and randomly and without that lesson learned moment. But to me, Alice in the book doesn't feel like as much of the main attraction as Wonderland and the Looking Glass Land are themselves. And even then, at least the book Alice seems fascinated and affected enough by her time in Wonderland to at least recount her adventures to her sister, while in the film, this was another thing that I kind of went on about in the episode. Alice just wakes up, vaguely mentions a caterpillar to her sister and then just moseys inside for tea as if this whole thing has had no effect on her whatsoever. And the film Alice's main motivation is following the White Rabbit and finding out what he's up to, which she just abandons when Wonderland gets too frustrating, saying, "Oh, that rabbit, who cares where he's going anyway?" And it's that was the main thing that we had from her to latch onto. And film Alice is so poorly defined that her main characteristic, her curiosity, even that is easily abandoned. So for me, I talked about this in the episode too. The animated film suffers from too many males trying to one-up each other stylistically in what I think could have been a film that took the antics of the book and put the focus back on Alice as a Disney movie, as the Disney take on the story. But I just would never put faith in a group of men from the 50s creating a story about girlhood and what that feels like. So there's that. But and I can acknowledge that book Alice is definitely the source of some of the parts of the film Alice that frustrate me that I talked about in the episode, consuming strange drinks and food. But there's differences. We see book Alice when she's consuming drink me and eat me and little cakes and she's changing sizes. It feels like she's just trying something, just trying anything in this confusing world to try to make a little bit of sense of it. Film Alice, they just give her these lines that I'm just why did we change her this way? Film Alice fully acknowledges that what she is about to drink could be poison and drinks it anyway. And I'm just why? I get it, she's a child. But why am I expected to get behind that? And why did we, now that I've read the book, I'm just why did we make that choice? Because book Alice isn't really like that, and I think book Alice is just so much more tolerable to me. I think the narration style helps because we get a much better understanding of what's going on in Alice's head and her thought process. She can definitely still be very rude and impatient. It really stuck out to me when she calls the jurors during the trial stupid things for writing down their own names. I get it. Like, there are a lot of folks in Wonderland call her stupid. They pick apart everything she says. I'm all for her clapping back when people do that, but like there are instances like that where she's just rude and mean for no reason.
Yeah,
But
Alice, you get 400 points on the SAT for just writing your name.
come on, like it's just like totally unnecessary. They're just like a bunch of like little like lizards and creatures. Like, why are we picking on them? Um, but it just makes me laugh. But I think that the book Alice does have a lot more empathy. The narrator describes many instances in which she's really trying her best to be patient, or she thinks something, but she knows it's best not to say it out loud for fear of hurting someone's feelings or upsetting them. So, like, for example, when the White Knight asks her if she'll wait to see him off, she responds really sweetly and she says, "Of course I'll wait. Thank you very much for coming so far and for the song. I liked it very much." Even when in reality, we know she was not the biggest fan of his song. Like, it didn't make her cry. She didn't really care for it. And that's all I needed from the film Alice. Like, she can still be imperfect and impatient and rude at times, especially again, what you read, Emily, really helped me because I'm like, right, like we're navigating like childlike versus adult like reactions to things. But we need moments of balance from her. And there are just, for me, next to none in the film. There's nothing to balance her out and to get me on her side. So I really, really come for her in my rant about that on Poor Unfortunate podcast. Again, more focused on the Disney aspect of things and like why she's also a very major part of like Disney parks and merchandising, and that's always confused me. But yes, book Alice was a big relief to me. So I think I don't take back any of what I said, but I'm starting to understand that there were things done to her from the way that she began in the book that just were really unfair.
Well, I had found your episode to be very eye-opening, and that's what led to your invitation here because, as I said, we're going to unpack some stuff for me. I realized I don't actually like Alice. I like the aesthetic of Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah. Oh my God, yes!
I'm going to take us all back to like 2010 to 2014, where I'm an active user of Tumblr.
Are we in a Hot Topic store right now as well?
My Tumblr was called Adventures in Tumblrland. And it was all kinds of things. It was pretty pictures that I liked reblogging, but I would reblog a lot of Alice in Wonderland stuff, the gifts, the like fun little moody things. And I think when you're kind of like an angsty 18 to 21-year-old in that time frame, you're like, yeah, experimental. What's going on? I'm coming into adulthood. So these out of context gifts resonated with me, and I like all of the colors of the film. I am a huge Mary Blair fan, and her influence is all over this. Like, if you look at the concept art, a lot of that did translate directly into the background. So watching the movie, like, I wasn't actively watching the film in college. I was just a little poser. Like, yeah, I like these gifts. Revlogging them. I had like an Alice in Wonderland scarf of like the text of the book. And
oh my God.
I'm
obsessed.
I realized it was the aesthetic of the film, not maybe the actual content itself. Because yeah, your rant, which I again highly recommend to our listeners, was like really in depth. I was like, this is like a feminist think piece, and yeah, I never really approached it this way. But I guess between the two, I don't know, I do have a soft spot for the movie because of that aesthetic. So I guess either character is not great, but I do give it to the movie just because I'm like, well, at least it's pretty to look at.
Honestly, fair.
Yeah, Alice, I have to agree. I think I like book Alice a little bit more than film Alice, but then we're going to talk theme parks. Theme park Alice is a totally different Alice as well, and I love theme park Alice.
I do too.
So I think a lot of what this book is that, like we said, it's episodic. I like that how Doug described that, and I think once you find your episode of Alice you really enjoy, if that's playing croquet, if that's going to the tea party, if that's listening to Tweedledee.
It sure as heck ain't the walrus and the carpenter, because that makes me
No.
sad.
No, never.
That
Never.
okay. They're so cute.
Oh, we're going to be ready for more hot takes.
I'm not okay. Sorry, I interrupted, but that
But
has
I
been
think
weighing on me.
But I think that's what makes you love Alice in some ways, that you find that episode, that piece of Wonderland that you really like, and it's probably through the aesthetic, which part do you like, and then that's what brings you to Alice. But as Alice, as a character itself, I'd have to agree that I think book Alice is a lot more sympathetic of a character, empathetic. You can find more things, or you can trust when she does have those moments that you're like, well, yeah, she's 7. Like you can forgive it more, and you can remember like, yeah, when I was 6-7 years old, I probably did the same. So I think, like you said, having her internal monologue, we get a lot more narration in that perspective that really helps you know her a lot better, that we just don't get in the film. Were there any other characters that we want to chat about?
I really like the Mad Hatter, personally. He's one of my favorite, both the book and the film. I think that's just because I love Edwin as an actor. I think he's a gem of a human being. And so that's just him being himself. Like, if you see him in anything else, Doug and I actually watched a Twilight Zone episode that he was in earlier this evening, and you're just like, yeah, nope, that's the Mad Hatter. There he is. Or is it Uncle Albert in Mary Poppins?
Oh, yes. Oh, my God.
Like, you can't separate it in Mary Poppins.
Very similar. It's a tea party. Exactly. See, they knew what they were doing with that casting.
I really genuinely enjoyed a lot of the characters from Through the Looking Glass. Humpty Dumpty, I don't know what it was. Like, he felt very clear to me. Like, I felt like I could hear his voice in my head. He still got the self-important condescending thing going on, but I don't know, he just felt a little bit less abrasive to me, and maybe I was also just grasping onto, I'm like, like a character that I recognize. And I already mentioned something about the White Knight. I don't know. He really touched my heart. I have been deeply affected by the White Knight, and I'm going to have to unpack that. I don't know what it was, but I think he was just a welcome relief to me, because even though he was chaotic, he wasn't unkind, and he felt like the closest thing that Alice gets to a real companion in this story. Like, they're both like, hey, I'll wait for you, or I'll bring you to where you need to go, and I'll see you off. Like, thank God, like a touch of humanity, and this felt so nice. And I think that's why I also I latched onto the fawn, who was in it for like half a page, who Alice like briefly meets in the woods. But I don't know, I think it was the illustration as well of like Alice has her arms like clasped around the neck of the fawn, and they're just trying to find their way through the forest together. This is what I'm saying, is like, I just needed more gentleness, and I know that is not the point of the story at all. So that's why I know it's just not for me. But I also have to bring up the leg of mutton when Alice is queen, who like bows to her, and completely killed me. Like, that was incredible. Hilarious.
I had an illustration of that, and I was like, yes, I'm here for it.
The illustrations were so fun. And I don't know, just a lot of these little ones, like the griffin, a lot of them in Through the Looking Glass were just so appealing to me. And we'll talk about that later.
I'm still going to wear that scarf. I mean, it has great illustrations.
I'm a
conversation piece now.
I have so many things like that. I'm so in love with that.
A character that surprised me was, going into this knowing the Disney film so much, the White Rabbit is like not a thing. Yeah. She follows him, and then like, yeah, he shows up, but like, that's the through line that Disney picked. Yeah, like we go to his house, but like other than the first third of Wonderland, like that's not a big motivation for her. Like, follow the rabbit, which we'll talk about the film, but I think Disney did a little something there where like we kind of have to have a reason why she's going through all these scenes, which is one thing that I think they did pretty well with, that I think maybe Wonderland in the book could have benefited from, of at least something small that took her from scene to scene to scene versus just wandering. But I was really surprised, because as much as, you know, I'm late for a very important date. And down the rabbit hole, like the number of things that we reference about the rabbit, he's not as big of a character as you think he is.
Yeah.
I want to give a shout out to Bill the Lizard, because Bill the Lizard is the link between our 2 episodes with you, Caroline. He has a cameo in The Great Mouse Detective. He shows up. He transcends space and time and joins Radigan's gang. So let's give it up for Bill.
This one's for you. Pour one out.
Caroline, going along those lines, who is worse, Film Alice or the burlesque dancer?
This is like Sophie's Choice in the worst
Hey,
way.
fellas.
Hey, fellas. Well, I'm going to have to say, I can't. Well, this is the worst thing I've ever had to do. I think Film Alice is worse. The Hey Fellas mouse just puts me off, and I like pity her because I'm like, how did she end up in this situation? So I'm gonna have to.
Backstory?
What's the backstory there? Also, if anybody listened to another very random episode of Poor Unfortunate Podcast, like Connor made me make a very difficult choice and was like, you know, you can win the Tony and you can be on Broadway, but you have to play the Hey Fellas mouse on Broadway, and I said I would. So I think Film Alice is worse for me.
That's fair.
I respect it. Well, I do think I know what your answer to this one is going to be, but this won't be as much of a Sophie's Choice. Which did y'all like better in terms of the book, Wonderland or Through the Looking Glass?
As I've already said, it's Through the Looking Glass all the way for me. It was like it was a huge relief. I'm wondering now if it's just because I didn't really have as much preconceived anger to layer on top of it, but I don't know. It was just I liked the characters more. There was a little bit more of a thrust to the story for me, and I felt my mind wander a lot less when we were in Looking Glass Land. And the characters were so vivid. So I'm very excited to talk with you both about, you know, the choices that were made for the film. So Looking Glass all the way.
For me, I think I also have to agree with Looking Glass. I think also because with the exception of the tea party, my favorite scenes from the film, Disney's film, my favorite episodes in Wonderland are actually from the Looking Glass. Tweedledee and Tweedledum's in the Looking Glass. The flowers are in the Looking Glass. We'll talk about poems, but like I love the Jabberwocky in Looking Glass. So I have to agree. I think Looking Glass is better, but there are still moments in Wonderland that I do like.
I'm the odd one out. I like Wonderland. I like the concept of this world of nonsense. Maybe it's just because I like the setting of Alice in Wonderland is obviously very much Wonderland when I'm talking about setting for the film. Like you get stories from Through the Looking Glass, but my understanding or my read on it was that Through the Looking Glass is a different world. She doesn't return to Wonderland. She's in this opposite mirror world.
So I have a question then. I was going to ask you to this. So we see the Hatter and the Hare in Through the Looking Glass.
Yeah, they're the only recurring characters.
So what does it mean? I mean, there's probably is no meaning, but
multiverse.
Yeah, you're right because Bill has traveled out of Wonderland as well. So who knows?
They have a park hopper pass that lets them just at 2 p.m.
Oh my god!
For me, I think just again, I like the visual aesthetic of Wonderland. So maybe it was as I was reading that first, because that is how they were released and how they're often packaged. Like it was easier for me to picture in my brain the setting, thanks to Mary Blair's wonderful artistic pieces. And I don't know, like I'm not into chess, so I was like, I don't get these like move 8 squares and now you're a queen.
I think what Looking Glass offered then for me and Caroline is that with the chessboard, there's kind of a purpose.
That's fair.
Right, exactly.
Although I totally think it's more checkers because someone doesn't become a queen in chess, but
That's
you become
true.
a king in checkers.
See, I've never played chess, so I was like, I don't know. I guess
it read more like checkers.
I actually don't really know how to play chess either, so that's very interesting, huh?
My knowledge of chess comes from Harry Potter, but you know,
not me, not Hermione.
You.
But so I think that helped with Looking Glass, but it's a tough, like I'm saying Looking Glass, but it's a tough call because there are things in Wonderland that I do really like as well.
And I think it's that tough call that makes the film rely on both. So what are your theories as to why Disney combined adventures from both into one film?
I'm honestly just wondering if they were unsure about how successful the film would be and they didn't want to risk missing out on characters like Tweedledee and Tweedledum and the Talking Flowers. Because I think those are really exciting to animate. So I think like, you know, aesthetics was such a huge motivator for this whole thing. That I think the impetus for the film was the design, and Talking Flowers are fun to animate. And I honestly though, I don't really have a clear answer for this because we'll talk about this a little bit later, but there are just characters from Through the Looking Glass that feels like they jump right off the page for me if I was diving into this for the first time looking for characters to make part of the Disney lexicon of characters. There are such clear options for me that they didn't choose. So I'm very excited to discuss that as well, because as far as this goes, I'm a little bit mystified as to what they picked and chose.
Reading this, Courtney, I reflected on the discussion we had when we read Mary Poppins, of how he gave the writers the book and said tab the pages, and they all came back with the same chapters. Now, Mary Poppins comes later in the 1960s, but I feel like they must have done the same thing. Like, read the book, tab the episodes that you think are going to be the best to animate, and they just, like you said, Caroline, like, what are the ones that are going to stand out? And they combined a lot of things. Like, I was surprised to see that the concept of unbirthday,
I was going to say that too.
of the tea party in the film, is actually from Humpty Dumpty.
I was shocked.
Yeah, me too.
Parts of the Queen of Hearts is a combination character of both the Red Queen from chess and the Queen of Hearts. Like, a lot of things that the Red Queen said, like curtsy, say your majesty, all of those things, and the character that characterized the Queen of Hearts actually are a different queen. So they did a lot of combination things to work in as many parts of both as possible. But I really felt like it was that same, maybe this was the test page that they did with Mary Poppins, where they're like, which ones do you think work best if we string them together? And they didn't really, it wasn't about telling two separate Alice stories. It was just Alice in this nonsensical world.
I'm glad you brought up the unbirthday, because I got through Alice's Adventures in Wonderland first, and I was like, huh, that's weird. There was no unbirthday. Where the heck did that come from? And then we got to Humpty Dumpty, and I was like, oh, interesting that they're like, oh, I like this idea of an unbirthday. That's funny, but maybe we can work it into the tea party or things like that. So I think they were probably just overwhelmed between the two books, and were looking for what they thought would translate well to animation as well. I think that's a deciding factor that we haven't really discussed. Like, what's going to be fun to animate or work well. Like, I guess Humpty Dumpty's in the public domain, but like maybe that's a character that people are already too familiar with, so let's leave him out. And then visually, I imagine the checkerboard style of the land of Through the Looking Glass would be rather difficult or annoying to animate. So they're like, scrap that, but we like those Tweedledee and Tweedledum, and for some reason we love their Walrus and Carpenter.
Oh God!
So let's just break everybody's hearts and animate these cute little oysters that you're gonna fall in love with and murder them. I do have a theory. Okay, I tried to make myself feel better, because I get sad when that part happens.
No, I do as well. I cannot stand it.
I tried to talk. I was like, oh, I hate this part. I tweeted about it yesterday. But I did notice at the very end of the film, when they're like doing the caucus race of chaos and like all the characters kind of back running around her and she's escaping out of the dream, I saw like 4 little oysters running. So I'm going to choose to believe that they lived somehow, and that it was just like a play within a play. And it was demonstrating the poem, but the oysters did not die, because there were 4 of them at the end. I was like, they lived.
They live.
They live.
Oh my God. All right. So another thing that I wanted to ask you two about. So Emily, you mentioned this in the intro. So Lewis Carroll was a renowned poet of the Victorian era, and there are several poems throughout both of these books. And I want to know if you two have a favorite of those.
This is where we're going to come into conflict. What's really cool is I think the poetry throughout is my favorite part. And it's interesting, like, when the poetry serves as a story within the story, anytime it's a character telling Alice a story, it's a poem. So you can differentiate between her adventure in Wonderland and then these other small episodes of other characters who aren't in Wonderland get fed in. I thought that was a really interesting writing style of how to get between those two. But it's basically an anthology of a bunch of poems. My favorite, I did really love the song from The White Knight. I love the Jabberwocky poem just because I like the word Jabberwocky and Bandersnatch. And I like the play of words in there. But this is where you're both going to come at me. I love the Walrus and the Carpenter.
Wow.
Oh,
you murderer.
Please.
Okay, so when I texted Courtney about this, the main reason why I love it is I love that one verse. The time has come, the walrus said, to talk of other things, of shoes and ships and sealing wax and cabbages and kings, and whether the sea is boiling hot and whether pings have wings. I love that verse. I like the nonsense of it, and I love the cadence. Again, hearing him read it, it has a very it's a couplet cadence, so it's very rhythmic. I enjoy it for those reasons, and particularly for that um, verse. Fun fact, though, the Disney one. So when I read the poem in the book and then watched it in the film, the book oysters are not a family. They're just oysters. There's no mother oyster. They are not baby oysters.
Less sad that way.
Okay.
It's just all these oysters are like, oh, it would be nice to see the sun, and then they get eaten. Um, so it's a little less emotional. But also in the Disney version, the end of that verse that I just recited, they then say, Kalu Kale, no work today, we're cabbages and kings. Kalu Kale comes from the Jabberwocky poem. So Disney even combined different parts of the poems. So those are my favorites. Again, I just love that one verse. I don't condone the actions of the walrus and the carpenter, but I do very much enjoy that poem.
I thought the Humpty Dumpty poem was rather funny. Now, I'm not talking about Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, Humpty Dumpty had a great fall, though that does come into play within the book. But he's telling this poem or reciting a poem, and it just ends on a cliffhanger. He says, "And when I found the door was shut, I tried to turn the handle, but..." And Alice is like, "Okay, and he's like, "Yep, no, that's it." So I just felt like that about summed up my experience reading. I was like, this feels par for the course.
I liked Humpty Dumpty's fourth wall moment where he's like, why do you know the king sent his men? And she's like, you're in a book. He was like, why do you know these things? And she's like, everyone knows these things. I thought that was funny that he broke the fourth wall.
I also really enjoyed when Humpty Dumpty was explaining what all of the words in the Jabberwocky mean as well. Because I was like, thank God. I was wondering too. So that was just a huge relief for me. I enjoy the Jabberwocky, but like, I don't know. When I was thinking about this point, I was like, I was going to poke around and pick a poem that I sort of like. But the truth is, it's so interesting. We have the opposite opinion, Emily. I can't stand the poems. I'm probably lazy. My brain it's probably turning to rot because of social media and like being able to get through things quickly and not have to think too deeply about them. But for me, they felt like they constantly slowed the action down, which I think was the point half the time, because when a character would launch into one, Alex was like, oh geez, like please, I really don't want to hear this.
I think it's really, Emily really benefited from having the audiobook, because you don't have a choice. But I agree with you, Caroline, when you're looking at the text, you're like, oh, okay, now it's indented and italicized.
Yeah.
We're doing something different. And my brain wanted to skim them too. And I don't know what it is about our brains, but
it's sad.
Poems are sad. I feel like meant to have a rhythm and be read aloud. So I can see where that would enhance it for Emily.
I have that similar approach when I read Lord of the Rings. Though Lord of the Rings has so many songs and poems.
I'm not touching that one.
I haven't read it. Yeah, I'm not that's a whole
I didn't make it far.
Thing that people come at me for. I don't like Alice in Wonderland. I don't like Lord of the Rings.
It's okay, because I never finished reading Harry Potter, so this is a safe space.
Oh, thank you.
What I'm getting at with the poems is like, while I enjoyed them in Alice, I have a similar approach to like, they're not important to me in other books that do the same thing.
I did enjoy I enjoy the Golden Afternoon poem that opens things up. That's nice.
Yeah, the opening is beautiful. And that's where the flower song that Disney comes from, taking the Golden Afternoon.
Right. So I'll choose that one because I have to.
Okay, so back to the film. Now let's like really compare here between the book and the film. Do we think Disney's Alice in Wonderland upholds the integrity of the story of Alice in Wonderland?
In that it like makes no sense and doesn't have a through line? Absolutely. No, I think it does have the whimsical nature of the book. It, as Walt said, it was a hard one to adapt. Walt himself said that it had no heart. So we have Walt's hot take on it, thanks to Disney A to Z. But I think they did with it what they could.
I definitely agree with you. I definitely, the tone of things not making sense. Yep. But it's interesting to me, Walt talking about it not having any heart. I'm like, I think, copying the tone and the nonsensicalness isn't necessarily what I wanted out of a Disney retelling of this story. And there were opportunities, now I know, in the text to give it that heart that he said was missing. So I don't know, interesting choices made all around. But I think where it doesn't really uphold the integrity is in Alice, as we've already discussed. Like, I'm just really bothered by the way the film highlights her anger and her sulkiness. And even though book Alice has it, it more naturally rises out of her circumstances. And I feel like film Alice is told through the eyes of men who view young girls as whiny, while you can feel Lewis Carroll's fondness for children and some sort of understanding of what they're going through that is just not present in the film at all for me.
Yeah, I think we lose Alice, but the overall world of like, let's go on adventures in these quirky places is there. Like, I think even though there's some big differences when it comes to the heart, it's still recognizable as Wonderland. A lot of the scenery, even looking at the illustrations to then what Disney put together, while it's not the same, it's not the Punch animation style, the cartoonist caricature. Um, the setting is very, like, you see how it translates very well. So I think Disney did a good job of bringing those stories in, and for each individual episode that they picked, it's almost pretty exact to what is in the book. At least the setting, the other characters who are there, like the March Hare, the Mad Hatter, all of those characters they picked, the flowers, they're pretty darn exact. So I think in that way they were very true to the book with the aesthetic, with the scenes, the mini episodes. I think you're right. It's where Alice was concerned that they really dropped the ball there. Um, but yeah, we already talked about major similarities and differences. I did think it was interesting how they combine stuff. For me, where the film loses me is when she gets lost in like the pathways before we get to the queen. Like, I did pretty well keeping up with her with like to the White Rabbit's house, to the Mad Tea Party, to the first time we see the Cheshire Cat. Like, that moves pretty good for me because we're still, like you said, that through line of we're following the rabbit. But then, like, yeah, that middle portion where she's just kind of lost before the Cheshire Cat's like, oh, go through this door. And then we finally get like a cool scene again. That's that's where it slows down for me, that I think they lost it.
I think you're right in terms of like integrity of the book, totally like lost it there. But for me, I remember I was like, well, finally, like when she's sitting there, crying and being like, I'm so tired of being lost and being confused, and like all of the little creatures are watching her. I finally felt something for the first time. So I kind of like that part of it, but it kind of, to your point, like it does sort of in this version, it sticks out like a sore thumb because we don't really get that heart and sincerity in this. So I don't know, it was a relief for me, but it doesn't really fit at the same time.
I think that's fair. I do want to touch on the Tim Burton adaptations. I know a lot of our discussion is centered around the animation, and we don't need to go too deep here. But I feel like this is a forgotten live action. Like, a lot of people are like, oh,
Yeah.
the live action remakes start with Cinderella. And I'm like, no, that was a good 5 years after this
Mhm.
2010 Tim Burton Alice in Wonderland. So just a quick thought on both of those films, how it compares to the story, and whether or not you liked that one.
I actually watched this for the first time to prepare for this episode.
Oh,
Yes, and because I just avoided it because I was like, I don't like Alice in Wonderland, and I enjoyed it. Like, although like the Wonderland in it feels very accurate to the book in terms of the tone and the vibe, this story has that much clearer thrust that I'm looking for, in that Alice has to live up to her destiny of slaying the Jabberwocky. I really loved meeting an older Alice, and I was honestly shocked to find that when she flashes back to being a child in Wonderland, realizing that it was all real and it wasn't a dream, I like felt a little emotional. And I feel like it, the things that I don't like about the Alice film are not like things that are wrong. It's just my personal taste of just like the lack of a through line. It just isn't my thing. And so this gives it like, what's the point? We're getting to Frabjous Day. That's the end goal. And we finally get to see Alice display some bravery and really step up and have a task to complete. And then we've got like the sort of romance thing that might be happening with the Hatter. I haven't seen the second one, so I'm not sure. And we get the White Queen, and I actually just really love all of these things, but I was like, should it be called Alice in Wonderland because it's not really that story. And I also was like, would Lewis Carroll be like, this is way too linear. Like, what the hell are y'all doing with my story? But I really, really liked it. It was a huge relief to me. So I'm so glad that I watched it, and I will definitely watch Through the Looking Glass as well.
I have to agree. Those are things that I think are strengths. We talked about this, I think it was with Peter Pan, making Wendy older, also making Alice older. I think that confrontation of growing up is a little bit easier to see, not at 7 years old, where you're like, yeah, you still have like 6 years of childhood to get through. Whereas that switch from in the Tim Burton film, she's starting to court. She's coming out as a debutante. Like, there's that dating aspect that now she's getting thrown into, and she's like, am I ready for this? What is my life supposed to be? Am I going to get married and have a family and be a housewife? Or am I going to embark in my, the shipping industry with my dad? Like, I think that makes that conflict of growing up easier when you're on the cusp of what is considered a child and an adult versus still going through that stage. So I think that agency gives her a lot more to work with. And again, like you said, the Adventures in Wonderland, like, she's part of a prophecy. There's much more of a plot, which makes it more intriguing. And they were able to bring in a lot more characters. Like you said, they do the same thing of combining both Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass, but you get a more robust world building.
I would say for sure that they do a good job of combining both, because I absolutely thought that I had seen the Tim Burton Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass film, and then I realized the Through the Looking Glass sequel came out in 2016. I was like, no, I did not see that. I just thought that the presence of the White Queen, like, I was misremembering, because there's so much of Through the Looking Glass in the Tim Burton Alice in Wonderland, but then he decided to make a sequel called Through the Looking Glass. So I have not seen that yet. I think part of that is because Johnny Depp looks very much like a clown, and I'm afraid of clowns. So I only saw the 2010 Tim Burton once, and I was like, I'm good. That was enough for me. And it came out in 2016. My husband and I were long distance, so I wasn't really like going to the movies all that often. I was like, no. But in my brain, I was convinced that there was not that big of a gap between those two films, and that I did see it. But I was like, no, I was only just remembering half of the 2010 film. So maybe
that's so fascinating. I would have thought that as like a lover of the aesthetic of Alice in Wonderland. I feel like a lot of the people that I knew who were into that were then super into the Tim Burton version as well, and Johnny Depp looking very scary, and so that's fascinating.
There's definitely a Venn diagram of the Tim Burton aesthetic and the Alice in Wonderland. I am all the way on the right-hand side. That is just the animated
hilarious
feature. I mean, like, I like some Tim Burton stuff. We've unpacked it. I have Nightmare Before Christmas issues, so I'm just
I get it.
I'm not all in on the Tim Burton vibes. I feel like Tweedledee and Tweedledum, if I remember correctly, kind of look like Pugsley from Addams Family, and I was like, no, I'm not feeling that. So thanks for indulging our little derailing there. I felt like it was something we had to at least acknowledge. But circling back to the animated film, is there an adventure in the book that you wish had made it into the film?
So I feel like I've made my answer pretty obvious by now, but I just like really, I'm kind of in love with the White Knight. I wouldn't mind if, he was played with a little bit. Maybe he doesn't necessarily have to be older. I love the queens, and the unicorn and the lion were very fascinating to me. Yeah. They all feel all of these that I've just named feel very quintessentially Disney, which Alice in Wonderland really isn't. So it's just interesting. It makes me wish that Disney had chosen an almost entirely different crop of characters for the film. Because like for me, maybe again, like the lion and the unicorn, them fighting. Do I necessarily want that adventure in the movie? Maybe not. But I want them in it, because like when the unicorn says to Alice, if you'll believe in me, I'll believe in you. Is that a bargain? I am so shocked that no one from Disney wanted a moment like that in the film. That feels like a quote that we could plaster everywhere, in the parks, on merchandise, all this stuff. Not to mention that I personally would have loved a Disney licensed unicorn character, but that's a whole other thing. And then just like, I don't know, Disney turning down the opportunity for 2 more queens and a knight. It's just very odd to me. And I guess it's just because it's like, that's a little bit more typical Disney royalty stuff that they were just really trying to move away from. But like I mentioned, I enjoyed Humpty Dumpty as well. I just want overall just so many more adventures from Through the Looking Glass.
I think I'm going to agree with you. I think why they didn't go with the other queens is that would be 3 royalty if they're combining both the kings and queens from a card deck versus the kings and queens from chess. Like, it's just a lot. But I think, like I said, the problem area for me was where she's in that road and then we just like, poof, oh, here's a doorway to the queen. I think that's where the White Knight could have been used, where she's lost in that section, and then we get a companion who brings her to the queen. Maybe we can get a transition from I've given up following the rabbit, I just want to go home, and now someone else can be inserted to be like, I can help you get home. You need to go, kind of like you said, Wizard of Oz, like, you need to get to Oz, you need to get to the Queen of Hearts. There's something there that can, or someone there could help you, or some, I don't know what it could be, but I think that would have helped move that along versus her just sitting and wallowing. Aesthetically, it's beautiful with the black light, and it almost looks like a black light room with like bright colors but a dark background. But to me, if I was going to bring something from the book into the film we already have, I think I would have taken the White Knight, have him help her get to that final scene before we wrap up the film.
Mine was definitely the Duchess and the Pig Baby.
Oh my God.
No, that was weird. Google that.
Fuel.
Google that illustration and just
I hate
with you. No, I think I would have liked to see Humpty Dumpty, just to see Disney's take on that iconic nursery rhyme. I bet he would have been like really cute animation wise.
I so agree. Well, speaking of some of the nightmare fuel parts of this, I guess the ultimate question is, would you go to Wonderland or the Looking Glass realm if you could?
I think I would, just for the sake of, does everyone get that chance of like, I feel like I would, like Alice, even at 31 years old, I would be frustrated to no end. And I'm a high school teacher. I have a lot of patience. I live in the nonsense of Wonderland of 200 students a day. But I think it would be so interesting to see. And I wonder, so thinking about this question, I'm kind of curious if this is kind of like going back to our Peter Pan discussion, if your Wonderland is a reflection of you the same way as Neverland, like, would all of our Wonderlands be different, or are we going to Alice's Wonderland? Because I wonder what that would look like. So I would be intrigued to see, would it be the same? Would it be different? Now, we get that lore in Peter Pan where they explain that. He does not explain that here. For all we know, Wonderland is Wonderland. The realm of the Looking Glass is the realm of the Looking Glass. But yeah, I would be intrigued. I'm not sure which one I'd pick, one over the other. I think the chessboard would be interesting to go to, but I really want to go to the tea party.
Fair. Yeah, as long as it's a dream and I know for sure I get to wake up at the end, I think I could tolerate it for like half a day or so, however long she's there. But
yeah, I don't know if I could live there, but I would visit.
Between the two, I'd want to go to Wonderland, but specifically the Disney animated one, just to live out my Mary Blair fantasies.
Bring your scarf with you.
Yes.
Amazing.
Pack in the scarf, pack in a teacup. Like, I'm just going to lean into the chaos and have a good time. I feel prepared having read the book. I'm like, oh yeah, no, it's weird. You drink stuff, eat stuff. You don't know what's going to happen. Just go with it.
Yeah, bring a cooler with you.
There you go.
Bring some bags.
Like a lunchbox.
I'm not going. I just have absolutely no way, no how. I had strange dreams, like because I would read this before bed.
Yes.
I had bizarro dreams from this.
You were there.
Yeah, like I did it, I feel like, already, and I didn't like it. And like, speaking of like, the Alice in Wonderland and Tim Burton Venn diagram, like none of that was ever my thing. I am just, I don't know, maybe I'm just a straight and narrow kind of gal. I don't know. The weird, creepy, bizarro stuff is not my thing. And if Wonderland was going to be built off of like, a reflection of me, even more so, no. I am so full of anxiety. I cannot even imagine the horrors that would approach me in my own Wonderland. So just like, no, never, no, thank you.
Now, if we got to pick any like fictional world to go to, I'm not going to Wonderland.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Neverland versus Wonderland, I'm going to Neverland. If it had to be like Hogwarts versus Wonderland, I'm going to Hogwarts. Like, it's not the top fantasy place I'm going to go to, but if given the opportunity, I think like you, Courtney, like if I know I'm going to come out the other side, I'll go.
Green is my color. I'm going to the Emerald City by y'all.
Me too. I'm coming with you. Wait for me.
Yay. There you go.
But let's bring Wonderland into the theme parks. I kind of alluded to this earlier. even the version of Alice we get out of the film to the theme park is very different. So just kind of a general, what do we think about Alice in theme parks? As a quick rundown, things I thought of, at least off the top of my head, Walt Disney World has the teacups. We have meet and greets. We have an Epcot meet and greet, as well as so both Epcot and Magic Kingdom have a meet and greet with Alice. She's featured in parades. We have the Cheshire Cafe. Disneyland, we have the dark ride and we have the teacups. Disneyland Paris, we have the maze. I'm not familiar where Alice shows up in Japan, Hong Kong.
I would think they have teacups as well at least 2 of those international
But what do we
parks.
think about Alice in the theme parks?
All right, this is going to be my weird take. I absolutely love the Disneyland Dark Ride, and of the Disneyland Dark Rides, it is the best.
I agree.
My husband brought this up when we were watching. He's like, you know what's weird? He's like, it's my favorite dark ride. And it's the aesthetic. It lends itself to the black lights and the colors. And I feel like with those dark rides, you're moving so chaotically through a bunch of different scenes really quickly. So where does that work? In a movie where you're moving through a bunch of scenes very quickly and chaotically. Whereas sometimes other films feel like, oh, we're in the Spark Notes version of the film. I feel like it lends itself, and the little caterpillar ride vehicle is so cute, and I love anything that's like goes outside on a second level. I'm like, ooh,
absolutely.
Look at this.
It's literally a next level dark ride.
It is my rope drop at Disneyland. Like I head immediately to Fantasyland and do all the little dark rides. I think because I visit Walt Disney World more often than Disneyland, I'm like, we don't have this, so it feels very special. So weird feelings on the book and movie, but dark ride, 10 out of 10, no notes.
Courtney, we agreed about everything that had to do with like Great Mouse Detective and Basil of Baker Street as well, right?
Fair enough. Yep.
Yeah. So I feel like we're on this very strange but same way, because I love the dark ride so much. It's the same thing. There's something about, I always ride it at night actually when I go. So I love like when your little caterpillar goes on the outdoor track and it's dark outside. I don't know. There's something about it that is so wonderful. I could not agree more. It's my favorite dark ride. Like I skip a lot of other dark rides and I always go on that one. But this was something that I brought up, and I'd love to discuss this with you too in my podcast episode. Alice in the Parks, again with the aesthetic thing, I love like her aesthetic and the dress, and she always looks like adorable, and I love her being in the English Gardens in Epcot, but it's just like she is not the Alice from the movie at all. Like she is I'd be so interested to speak with someone who's friends with Alice, because she's very like friendly, sweet, and prim. And we know that the film Alice is like a little bit bossy and outspoken. I know that she's not going to like boss kids around as like a heroine of a Disney movie, but it's also interesting to me that I've seen Alice and the Hatter get on the teacups in Disney World, which was very cool. But it's funny because I'm like, the Mad Hatter really pisses her off in the movie. And they're just like running around hand in hand, best friends. And it just doesn't track for me. So I find her park appearances a little confusing.
It's Emily's story time. I know she's itching to tell it.
I'm so excited.
So in my DCP, my 6 months being friends with a number of characters, the White Rabbit had invited me a few times to Wonderland. So the White Rabbit and Alice have talked about their love of curiosity, and the White Rabbit's favorite tea is punctuality.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Drinking so much punctuality, even though one day I was late. Wasn't my fault. The White Rabbit got called late to the Queen's service. And forgot his smock. And the White Rabbit and I had to run to Alice. So fun fact, I don't know if they still do this magic moment, but in the 2015 when I was working there, the magical moment is if you are the family to first meet Alice and whoever is with her that day, if you're the first family in the meet and greet line, you get to ride the teacups with Alice.
God.
So the White Rabbit has invited me and I on the teacups with Alice. So that was... that's in my top 3 moments.
Core memory day.
Wow.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. But that's why Rabbit now, he wasn't ever my favorite character going into, like, before I got to be friends with him. But that was a really cool opportunity that 3 times I got invited to Wonderland and to the Mad Tea Party to hang out with Alice.
Wow.
So I'm a fan of the meet and greets. I think they're a fun meet and greet. I think she's a little bit sometimes more accessible than a princess. I think when people interactions, there's a little less of that like star shock. Like when a little kid meets a princess, they're like, it's Cinderella. And like she's in this big ball gown. Alice is in a more everyday dress. So I think a lot of her just makes her a more accessible character to talk to. And you don't meet her in both locations. She's not in a big room. She's not in this like giant line. She's on the walkway. She's always outside. So I think just that more relaxed setting, it makes her a much more accessible character that I noticed with families. Less kids were afraid at my times with Alice. That helps, but also you got the ride behind her. So I think the cool thing about her placement in Magic Kingdom and Walt Disney World is that she gets to be in her attraction out front of it. So I really think that helps, and it really elevates, I think, the meet and greet because she can play off that. You can talk about the Mad Tea Party while it's there. So for interaction wise, I really think her meet and greets both in Epcot in England at the tea shop and then also then at the Mad Tea Party elevate that experience a lot. And I think they're fun in parades. She's always wandering around. She's in every parade. So I really do like how they use
in Boo to You. I like when she has her little mask. Isn't her mask of the White Rabbit? I believe.
Oh, right.
In that parade. She's so adorable in that. So yes.
But I have to agree with both of you. The dark ride, as much as the teacups are cute because it's the Mad Tea Party, I hate spinning rides. Like I will ride the teacups, but my partner, he's like, let's spin as fast as possible. And I'm like, no. It spins enough for me to just be in the cup and move around and I'm happy. I don't need the extra spinning. But when you get that person who's like, let's go. And I'm like, nope, I'm gonna, no. I don't like spinning.
Well, as we wrap up here, we're going to redeem ourselves a little, I hope. I don't know. We already have a 4.9 on our 5-star rating, so it might be in the tubes from here, but let's try to redeem ourselves for those who really do love this story so much. Why do we think that people love this story so much?
All right, I have created some sort of hypothesis here because I cannot 100% relate. But, I think some childhood adventure stories like Wizard of Oz endure for some of the same reasons as Alice, the fantastical creatures, the magical world. But while some place like Oz has real rules and a clear goal, Alice's Adventures is random, it's meandering, it's unpredictable. And because of this, it really does have the feeling of someone making up a story on the spot for you and not quite being able to connect each character and plot point to the next. And there's something that feels probably a little bit comforting about that. Not to me personally, like I said, these books give me nightmares, but I know many people who find comfort in the bizarre. Like I know a lot of people who love Spirited Away. Spirited Away, I know it's beautiful, but it scares the hell out of me. And I think a lot of people find it comforting. And I think, like, speaking of a Venn diagram, I think there's a Venn diagram there of like the more bizarre, the more I think people can kind of let go and lose themselves in it. And it's a way to just escape. But it's not that for me personally.
I think I have to agree with what you've been echoing the whole time, Courtney, is aesthetic. Particularly from the Disney perspective, what Mary Blair put together is absolutely beautiful. But like you said, Caroline, I think this story just lends itself so much to imagination because there are no rules. And while we looked at this as a whole book, I think when you talk to most people of what they love about Alice in Wonderland, they do tend to focus on that episode, that one adventure that really stuck out to them. And I think that's what makes this fun is you can live in that one adventure. And I think that's what the theme parks do really well. That maybe the film kind of where people get lost in the whole film, but they love their one part, is you can go live in the Mad Tea Party. You can go through the maze in Disneyland Paris and make your way to Croquet with the Queen. Like you can live in that one moment and that setting and completely play around with it. And I think that's why we also see that there's so many ways you can adapt this story and build on this story because there's so much imagination. And I think that's what makes it so fun is the aesthetic you have, the non-rules and nonsensical, you can really play with what you want to take out of it. And everyone has a different pathway into Alice in Wonderland that they like.
Yeah, I believe it's the whimsy of it. I like that you said adaptable, because there are certainly a lot of different adaptations. We've talked about just a few here within the Disney realm, but it transcends Disney. You can seek out other ones. I believe there was a made-for-TV movie in the 90s with like Whoopi Goldberg and a bunch
Oh,
of
yeah. Oh, my
people. Alice is
God.
a brunette in that one,
Oh,
so
my God.
I think we're just unlocking core memories
There's a
here.
lot of stage ones that I saw pop up. Meryl Streep did a stage adaptation.
Wow.
There's a lot out there. Stage, film, other books. It inspires, like some people said, fashion, manga. Like it really has permeated. Like I don't think Lewis Carroll knew how much this story, 100 and almost 60 years later, is still being used in some way.
So in a way, it is very timeless, and I know that a lot of those adaptations likely informed some of our additional resources, so I'd love to move into those. Mine, we already touched on a little bit, but I did want to plug Disney Channel's Adventures in Wonderland, which ran from 1992 to 1995. It was not a weird shared fever dream that Caroline and I had from Spaceship Earth. Unfortunately, only one season is available on Disney Plus currently, but if you want to get a little taste of it, that is available to you there.
And as you all have so nicely plugged already, if you want to hear my full rant about Alice from the Disney film, you can tune into season 3, episode 10 of Poor Unfortunate Podcast titled Rabbit Hole. And we're available on all major podcast platforms. We're currently in our first non-Disney episode cycle, and Book of the Mouse listeners may be especially interested in season 3, episode 18, Twisted, which has us discussing 2 books turned films. So you can check that out too. But in terms of Alice, if you're a musical theater lover like me, there are so many stage and musical adaptations, but 2 that stick out to me. You can listen to the 2 original cast recordings of these Alice-inspired musicals. So the first is Alice by Heart, and that's written by the team behind Spring Awakening, and I was a big Spring Awakening girl when I was a teenager, so that's very much the same musical family. And then there's another one that's called Wonderland. That has just fascinated me because, number one, the White Knight is a very big character in the Wonderland musical, and it only ran on Broadway for like a month, and those kind of things always capture my imagination. So give that a listen if you want to try to figure out why with me.
The one I want to share, so we talked about My Friend the White Rabbit. We all know my love of my other friend, Mickey Mouse. One of my favorite Mickey Mouse shorts is from 1936, and it was the animated short Through the Mirror, where he goes through the looking glass. It only takes place in his bedroom, but I always had so much fun with that. His dream of going through what his house would look like through the looking glass and the adventures he has in that episode. So I really enjoy that Mickey Mouse short. So you get Alice in Wonderland vibes with other classic Disney characters.
Excellent picks all around. Thank you for your recommendations. And we are almost done with the British Invasion Summer Series. I hope you've enjoyed listening to them with us. I know we've gotten very candid, maybe a little more critical than we usually are, but that has brought out a lot of fun for us. And we will conclude in August with Charles Dickens' Oliver Twist, which heavily inspired the 1988 animated film Oliver and Company. We are excited to welcome back Paul Cody, who joined us in 2021 to discuss Dickens' Christmas Carol, as well as Paul's good friend and my husband, Dr. Doug. So it's sure to be a fun podcast party that you won't want to miss, and I am sure my enthusiasm for British literature will continue to shine through. In the meantime, you can find us, Book of the Mouse Club, on Twitter and Instagram at Book of the Mouse. Email us with comments. Let us know how you feel about Alice in Wonderland to bookofthemouseclub@gmail.com. I sincerely apologize if you absolutely love this book and are very angry. You're welcome to leave us a review on iTunes so others may find our podcast and read and listen with us. Let's see where that 4.9 goes. You can keep up with me, Courtney, on Instagram at Great Gutsby and on Twitter at Courtney_Guth.
And you can follow me, Emily, on Instagram and Twitter at Emily_McD. And Caroline, where can our listeners keep up with you and the Poor Unfortunate podcast?
So you can find me on Instagram. I am at Carol Aim, CarolAim. And you can follow Poor Unfortunate Podcast on Instagram at Poor Unfortunate Podcast. We are on Twitter at Unfortunate Pod, and we're Poor Unfortunate Podcast on Threads now as well.
Ooh, love it. Going into new social media. Well,
that's right.
Thank you so much for joining us as our guest of honor. I believe when it was your last episode, Connor got to do the quote and sang us out with a wonderful rendition of Goodbye So Soon. But what do you have in store for us today?
I have another song. No, I'm just kidding. I'm going to read, in my edition of the book, there's a letter from Lewis Carrol that's called An Easter Greeting to Every Child Who Loves Alice. So I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm going to abridge it a little bit because I found it very touching. So I think it'd be a nice way to close. It says, Dear child, please to fancy if you can that you are reading a real letter from a real friend whom you have seen and whose voice you can seem to yourself to hear, wishing you, as I do now with all my heart, a happy Easter. Do you know that delicious, dreamy feeling when one first wakes on a summer morning, with the twitter of birds in the air and the fresh breeze coming in at the open window? When lying lazily with eyes half shut, one sees, as in a dream, green boughs waving or waters rippling in a golden light? It is a pleasure very near to sadness, bringing tears to one's eyes like a beautiful picture or poem. And is not that a mother's gentle hand that undraws your curtains, and a mother's sweet voice that summons you to rise? To rise and forget in the bright sunlight the ugly dreams that frightened you so when all was dark. To rise and enjoy another happy day, first kneeling to thank that unseen friend who sends you the beautiful sun? And if I have written anything to add to those stores of innocent and healthy amusement that are laid up in books for the children I love so well, it is surely something I may hope to look back upon without shame and sorrow, as how much of life must then be recalled when my turn comes to walk through the valley of shadows. This Easter sun will rise on you, dear child, feeling your life in every limb and eager to rush out into the fresh morning air. And many an Easter day will come and go before it finds you feeble and gray-headed, creeping wearily out to bask once more in the sunlight. But it is good even now to think sometimes of that great morning when the Sun of Righteousness shall arise with healing in his wings. Surely your gladness need not be less for the thought that you will one day see a brighter dawn than this, when lovelier sights will meet your eyes than any waving trees or rippling waters. When angel hands shall undraw your curtains, and sweeter tones than ever loving mother breathed shall wake you to a new and glorious day. And when all the sadness and the sin that darken life on this little earth shall be forgotten like the dreams of a night that is past. Your affectionate friend, Lewis Carrol, Easter 1876.
Thank you so much for that. I feel like it really demonstrated the power of reading it aloud and hearing it and the difference that that can make. Thank you as well for your candor, for the discovery that we are once again kindred souls
Absolutely.
in our feelings here. We're so happy to welcome you back and appreciate all that you brought to this episode.
Thank you for listening.
Why is a raven like a writing desk?
Of the Mouse Club has no affiliation with the Walt Disney Company. The views and opinions expressed by hosts and participants are theirs and theirs alone. They do not represent the organizations or companies they happen to work for.